If M theory proves to be the complete theory of the universe, will it prove or disprove the idea of a benevolent creator?
M theory doesn't disprove God, but it makes him unnecessary. It predicts that the universe will be spontaneously created out of nothing, without the need for a creator.
Dr. Davies, we are having this conversation because the conclusion that Dr. Hawking makes is nothing short of breathtaking and certainly controversial. Is there any reason to believe that that should be the final word on the matter?
Well, in science, nobody ever has the final word on the matter. What I think Stephen is doing here is drawing a rather obvious conclusion, that if the universe had a beginning and a Big Bang and that there was no time before the Big Bang, and that's a crucial point, if there was nothing there before it, not even time, then the notion of a sort of cosmic magician who exists for all eternity within time and then creates the universe at some instant doesn't make sense. But that's not the God that most theologians I know talk about.
Well, there are questions, though, about what role God actually plays. Here's what theoretical physicist Dr. Michio Kaku has to say.
I believe that Stephen is going a little bit too far in saying that because time itself was born at the instant of the Big Bang, therefore there is no God. If the universe is a bubble of some sort, it's expanding, that's the Big Bang theory, but in string theory, there are other universes out there. There's a multiverse of universes. Think of a bubble bath. These bubbles can collide, merge, or they can split apart into baby universes. And so we can talk, therefore, about a world before the Big Bang, a multiverse of universes. And then the question is, where did the multiverse come from? You could argue, therefore, that maybe you need a God to create the multiverse, or a creator to create string theory, perhaps.
One of the points, though, Dr. Davies, the idea of multiverses, if I understand his meaning, is, look, there may be this universe, there may be multi-universes or multiverses, something so large that science has yet to really get its collective head around it, and that's the role of the ultimate creator.
Well, now this one's easy. This multiverse follows in a very natural way. If Stephen Hawking is right, that a universe can pop into being entirely in accordance with the laws of physics, no miracles. If it can happen once, it can happen many times. So we've now moved to a picture where there is a multiverse of many universes, many Big Bangs scattered throughout space and time, and we're just in one of them. That's the fashionable view today. But you still have to explain the multiverse. That still has laws. You need a universe-generating mechanism. You need to know where those laws come from. That's where the mystery lies, the laws. I think the key point here is that these very laws that we're talking about, the laws that permit a universe to pop into existence, are simply, for most scientists, unexplained. But when you come to where do the laws of physics come from, most scientists say that's not part of science. You just have to accept them as a package. And in the show, Stephen Hawking gets very, very close to saying, well, where do the laws of physics come from? That's where we might find some sort of God, and then he backs away and doesn't return to the subject.
So, how sure are we that the universe is the way that string theory describes it? Is the world really made up of strings and membranes, parallel universes, and extra dimensions? Is this all science or science fiction? Strings are thought to be so tiny, much smaller than an atom, that there's probably no way to see them directly.
I think it's actually stronger than that.
Okay.
That what is referred to as M theory isn't even a theory. Yes. It's a collection of ideas, hopes, aspirations.
Exactly.
It's not even a theory. And I think the book is a bit misleading in that respect. It gives you the impression that here is this new theory which is going to explain everything. It's nothing of the sort. It's not even a theory, and it certainly has no observational... partly it's this 10 to the 500 you refer to.
This is one of the interesting aspects of what he appears to be saying, is that M theory shows that the universe can create itself, so to speak, out of nothing. I mean, is that something which science can ever really tell us or be definitive? Take us
certainly not doing it yet. I think the book suffers rather more strongly than many. I mean, it's not an uncommon thing in popular descriptions of science to latch on to some idea, particularly things to do with string theory, which have absolutely no support from observation. They're just nice ideas that people have tried to explore.
But they will always remain theoretical. I mean,
always is too strong. It may well be they just be refuted, but even that is something which is they're very far from any kind of observational
or testability.
Tests, yes, they're hardly science.
Wait. So there are two kinds of nothing.
I'm going to talk about three.
He's got
Three. You got a fourth over here. Sorry. All right. I didn't know this. All right. We have more than one nothing. You raise a really important point that I want to get back to. What you're saying is you could have a universe that's got nothing in it, but if laws of physics still apply in that universe, the laws of physics are not nothing.
Yeah, where are the laws?
Okay. Why don't you like his nothing that he built his universe in?
But that's okay.
Why don't you like his nothing?
Now the question isn't was there something else that existed? The really amazing thing, the question that really matters, and it may not be the question that matters to some classical philosophers, but it's the question that really matters is, how did a universe of 400 billion galaxies containing 100 billion stars, how did that come into existence if there weren't galaxies, if there weren't stars, if there wasn't energy? And that is the question that physics is coming close to answering, and that may not be the ultimate question of whether there was nothing before that, but there was nothing, our universe didn't exist. And our universe coming into existence when it wasn't there in the beginning with zero energy, but still enough gravity to create everything we see is the amazing, remarkable miracle that science creates. And that's the important question.
Yeah, it's a great story. There's lots of empirical evidence for it. You've told a miraculous story about how a universe like ours was spawned by a piece of rubber. But where did the piece of rubber come from?
In the multiverse.
Wait. You said a quantum fluctuation brings the universe into existence.
That's because I can talk in our universe about quantum mechanics. But it could be, although this is wild.
Nothing else we've been talking about until now is wild. But this is wild. Okay, go.
This is even wilder. Okay, so it's quite plausible. In fact, if there are many universes, as current theory suggests, that in each of them, the laws of physics essentially come into existence when the universe comes into existence. There are different laws of physics in each universe.
Then you can't invoke a quantum fluctuation to give you the universe that has quantum fluctuation. Lawrence, just to put... so your universe that's created out of nothing, where there are no laws, no space, no time, no anything, that nothing had to know to create the universe.
Well, there may have been something else there, but our universe was
now
there.
you confess. I'm just trying to understand, because if there's no laws, then there's nothing to know to create a universe.
What if there's every law? Is that the same as no laws? That's the point.
I bet.
Well, I think Jim was sort of saying.
I wasn't
Jim
listening.
was alluding that to every possible law, every possible universe. There may be universes with no laws, or maybe universes with laws. That's certainly a possibility.
All I'm saying is, if you have a place, whatever that is,
there was no place.
If you have a no place with no laws, and then you birth a universe, something in that place had to know to birth that universe.
Why?
Okay?
Purporting to offer us an explanation, and you're offering us no explanation. All you're saying, it just is.
Yeah, he's kind of doing that.
To get a universe from nothing, you've described the process, and I've heard it described before, but what you're starting with doesn't sound a lot to me like nothing. It sounds like the laws of quantum physics.
Yeah, it's a quantum foam, Yes.
Yeah, so that's not nothing. That's something.
That means something, but it's nothing in the sense of that there is no geometry in particular,
right?
Because our universe has a geometry.
Yes, there's no geometry, but it is a geometry generating mechanism.
In principle, there could be through the tunneling you generate this. Now, mind you, as I said from the beginning, this is all speculation.
Of course,
we don't know how this
we like speculation. That's okay. But my concern is it's speculation and very interesting, and it may be right, but it's not answering the question. The question is, why is there something rather than nothing? And
my answer is that I do not know. I only can say that.
Because you're starting with...
According to the laws of physics that I know, this was possible.
Right.
But why it is, I don't know.
Right, but the laws of physics, if we have quantum physics, which is the generator, whether it's the indeterminate principle or whatever it is that is part of the quantum physics, is very complicated. But it is complicated. It is something, and it's a lot of stuff. Maybe it'll be reduced down to something even more simple in string theory, or who knows. But quantum field theory is a lot of things going on to make that. And so if you start with that, and you have a mechanism to generate a universe with geometries and everything else, but you're starting with something pretty rich.
Right. Well, you start with some laws.
Some laws,
yes.
Yeah.
So you're right. So the question is, why are there some laws? And again, I don't know the answer to that.
Well, the existence of nothing. Okay. Yes.
So in my book, Dark Matter and the Dinosaurs, I have a section on cosmology, and I actually talk about the probability of nothing. And I think nothing is just very unlikely. I mean, first of all, we wouldn't talk about nothing because we wouldn't be here. But nothing is just one. If you think of a number line, 0 is just one point on it. And nothing is just, I would say, is very unlikely. And if you have an explanation of why there's nothing, then there's something there that allowed you to have the rules that explain it.
So you're saying the act of posing the question of why there's something is proof that there could not have been nothing?
Right, so there's two answers.
Crystal clear now.
That's one answer, and the other answer is probabilistic.
So it seems to me that there was surely a time when nothing was just, I would say there's nothing between me and you. Then we learned that there's air, there's actual substance there, there's mass, there's energy, and so you couldn't call that nothing anymore. And then we learned that space has no air, and that's a relatively recent understanding. As late as the early 1600s, there were arguments that maybe you could fly to the moon, and by learned scientists. And the only way you could do that is if this air substance permeated the space between us and the moon. So now that when there's no air, so then space is the nothing, but then quantum physics, relativity tells us there's stuff going on even in empty space. So that removes that from our nothingness. And now we have to actually exit the universe. And I just wonder whether this nothing is an all-elusive moving target, that one day we will learn that you do create those universes out of a law of physics. It's the universe birthing law. And then there's a law in the place where we previously thought there was nothing. And then that just simply pushes the definition of nothing that much farther away that you have to chase it down, because then the space that has the law that we previously thought was nothing that birthed the universe, you can then ask, what birthed that?
Our abstract argument for the existence of God is the first cause argument. Let's just look at the simple, basic, intuitive, natural, commonsensical form of it. I think we all have to become rather clever in order to doubt it or to dispute it, because it's based on an instinct of mind that we all share. The instinct that says everything needs an explanation. Nothing just is, without a reason why it is. Everything that exists has some adequate or sufficient reason why it exists. Philosophers call this the principle of sufficient reason. We use it every day, in common sense and in science, as well as in philosophy. If you saw a rabbit suddenly appear on this empty table, you would not blandly say, "Hi there, rabbit, you came from nowhere, didn't you?" No, you'd look for a cause. You would assume there has to be some cause. We never deny the principle of sufficient reason itself. No one believes the pop theory, that things just pop into existence for no reason at all. Perhaps we will never find the cause, but there must be a cause for everything that comes into existence. Now, the entire universe is a vast interlocking chain of things that come into existence. Each of these things must therefore have a cause. My parents caused me, my grandparents caused them, etc. But it is not that simple. I would not be here without billions of causes, from the Big Bang through the cooling of the galaxies and the evolution of the protein molecule to the marriages of my ancestors. The universe is a vast and complex chain of causes. Now, does the universe as a whole have a cause? Is there a first cause, an uncaused cause, an eternal cause, a transcendent cause of the whole immanent chain of causes? If not, then there is an infinite regress of causes with no first link in the great cosmic chain. If so, then there is an eternal, necessary, independent, self-explanatory being with nothing above it, nothing before it, nothing supporting it. It would explain itself as well as everything else. For if it needed something else as its explanation, its reason, its cause, then it would not be the first and uncaused cause. Such a being could be called God. If we can prove there is such a first cause, we will have proved that there is some sort of God. Now, why must there be a first cause? Because if there isn't, then the whole universe is unexplained, and we have violated our principle of sufficient reason for everything. If there is no first cause, each particular thing in the universe is explained by some other thing, but the universe as a whole is not explained. Everyone and everything in the universe says in turn, don't look to me for the final explanation. I'm just an instrument. Something else caused me. But if that's all there is, beings that say that, then we have an endless buck-passing universe. God is the one who says the buck stops here. One more analogy. Suppose I tell you there is a book that explains everything you want explained. You want that book very much. You ask me whether I have it. I say, no, I have to get it from my wife. Does she have it? Well, no, she has to get it from a neighbor. Does he have it? No, he has to get it from his teacher, who has to get it from, etc., ad infinitum. No one actually has the book. In that case, you will never get it. However long or short the chain of book borrowers may be, you will get the book only if someone actually has it and does not have to borrow it. Well, existence is like that book. Existence is handed down the chain of causes, from cause to effect. If there is no first cause, no being who is eternal and self-sufficient, no being who has existence by his own nature and does not have to borrow it from something else, then the gift of existence can never be passed down the chain to others, and no one will ever get it. But we did get it. We exist. We got the gift of existence from our causes down the chain, and so did every actual being in the universe, from atoms to archangels. Therefore, there must be a first cause of existence, a God. The thing to do is to return to what is sure and clear, the intuitive point I began with. Not everyone can understand all the abstract details of the first cause argument, but everyone can understand its basic point. C.S. Lewis puts it this way, I felt in my bones that this universe does not explain itself.
Why does anything at all exist? Gottfried Leibniz wrote, the first question which should rightly be asked is, why is there something rather than nothing? He came to the conclusion that the explanation is found in God. Someone might say, if everything that exists needs an explanation, what about God? Doesn't he need an explanation? And if God doesn't need an explanation, then why does the universe need an explanation? To address this, Leibniz makes a key distinction between things that exist necessarily and things that exist contingently. Things that exist necessarily exist by necessity of their own nature. It's impossible for them not to exist. Many mathematicians think that abstract objects like numbers and sets exist like this. They're not caused to exist by something else, they just exist by necessity of their own nature. Things that exist contingently are caused to exist by something else. Most of the things we're familiar with exist contingently. They don't have to exist. They only exist because something else caused them to exist. There's no reason to think the world around us had to exist. If the universe had developed differently, there might have been no stars or planets. It's logically possible that the whole universe might not have existed. It doesn't exist necessarily, it exists contingently. If the universe might not have existed, why does it exist? The only adequate explanation for the existence of a contingent universe is that its existence rests on a non-contingent being. something that cannot not exist because of the necessity of its own nature. It would exist no matter what. So, everything that exists has an explanation of its existence, either in the necessity of its own nature or in an external cause. But what about our second premise? Is it reasonable to call the explanation of the universe God? Well, what is the universe? It's all of space-time reality, including all matter and energy. It follows that if the universe has a cause of its existence, that cause cannot be part of the universe. It must be non-physical and immaterial, beyond space and time. The list of entities that could possibly fit this description is fairly short, and abstract objects cannot cause anything. Leibniz's contingency argument shows that the explanation for the existence of the universe can be found only in the existence of God. Or, if you prefer not to use the term God, you may simply call him the extremely powerful, uncaused, necessarily existing, non-contingent, non-physical, immaterial, eternal being who created the entire universe and everything in it.
If one asks what caused God, the answer is that nothing could bring into being a reality which wholly transcends space-time and which is self-existent. To fail to grasp such an idea is to fail to grasp what God is. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. Something cannot come into being out of nothing.
This is rooted in the metaphysical idea that being cannot come from non-being. Out of nothing, nothing comes.
That Hawking hasn't even begun to address the question, why is there something rather than nothing? For nothing, in his vocabulary, does not have the traditional meaning of non-being, but rather means the quantum vacuum. Hawking and Mlodinoff's equivocal use of terms is painfully evident in their interview with the American television host Larry King on his program. Here is how it went. Hawking: gravity and quantum theory cause universes to be created spontaneously out of nothing. Larry King: who created the nothing? Where did the nothing come from? Mlodinoff: according to quantum theory, there is no such thing as nothingness. Now, in this ridiculous exchange, Hawking is using nothing to refer to the quantum vacuum, while Mlodinoff is using it to mean non-being. And they avoid the tough question, why is there something rather than nothing, only by equivocating on the use of their terminology. Despite Hawking and Mlodinoff's constant sniping at religious belief throughout their book, I think there is actually genuine profit in it for religious believers, especially for those interested in natural theology. For the authors affirm and argue for an absolute beginning of time and the universe, which points ineluctably to a transcendent cause beyond the universe. That the evidence of contemporary cosmology actually renders God's existence considerably more probable than it would have been without it. This is not to make some sort of naive claim that contemporary cosmology proves the existence of God. There is no God of the gaps reasoning here. Rather, I'm saying that contemporary cosmology provides significant evidence in support of premises in philosophical arguments for conclusions having theological significance. For example, the key premise in the ancient Kalam cosmological argument that the universe began to exist is a religiously neutral statement which can be found in virtually any textbook on astronomy and astrophysics. It is obviously susceptible to scientific confirmation or disconfirmation on the basis of the evidence. So, to repeat, one is not employing the evidence of contemporary cosmology to prove the proposition that God exists, but to support theologically neutral premises in philosophical arguments 4 conclusions that have theistic significance. The Kalam cosmological argument. 1. If the universe began to exist, then there is a transcendent cause which brought the universe into existence. 2. The universe began to exist. 3. Therefore, there is a transcendent cause which brought the universe into existence. By the universe, I mean that reality which is studied by contemporary cosmology. That is to say, all contiguous physical reality which currently takes the form of space-time and its contents. I take it that 1 is obviously true. Rather, the truly controversial premise is 2. Traditional supporters presented philosophical arguments in support of 2, which for me constitute its primary warrant. But they're not the subject of tonight's debate. Rather, what's emerged during the 20th century is a remarkable empirical confirmation of the second premise from the evidence of astrophysical cosmogony. 2 independent but closely interrelated lines of physical evidence support premise 2. Evidence from the expansion of the universe and evidence from the second law of thermodynamics. In saying that the cosmogonic evidence confirms 2, I am not saying that we are certain that 2 is true. Too many people mistakenly equate knowledge with certainty. When they say that we do not know that the universe began to exist, what they really mean is that we are not certain that the universe began to exist. But of course, certainty is not the relevant standard here. The question is whether 2 is more plausible in light of the evidence than it's contradictory. Professor Carroll reminds us, science isn't in the business of proving things. Rather, science judges the merits of competing models in terms of their simplicity, clarity, comprehensiveness, and fit to the data. Unsuccessful theories are never disproven, as we can always concoct elaborate schemes to save the phenomena. They just fade away as better theories gain acceptance. Science cannot force you to accept the beginning of the universe. You can always concoct elaborate schemes to explain away the evidence. But those schemes will not fare well in displaying the aforementioned scientific virtues. Even many who have expressed skepticism about premise 2 admit that it is more plausibly true than not. For example, in my recent dialogue with Lawrence Krauss, he volunteered, "I bet our universe had a beginning, but I am not certain of it. Based on the physics that I know, I'd say it is a more likely possibility." This is to admit precisely what cosmologists like Alexander Vilenkin have contended all along, that the evidence makes it more likely than not that the universe began to exist. Consider first evidence from the expansion of the universe. The standard Big Bang cosmogonic model implies that the universe is not infinite in the past, but had an absolute beginning a finite time ago. Although advances in astrophysical cosmology have forced various revisions in the standard model, nothing has called into question its fundamental prediction of the finitude of the past and the beginning of the universe. Indeed, as James Sinclair has shown, the history of 20th century cosmogony has seen a parade of failed theories trying to avert the absolute beginning predicted by the standard model. Meanwhile, a series of remarkable singularity theorems has increasingly tightened the loop around empirically tenable cosmogonic models by showing that under more and more generalized conditions, a beginning is inevitable. In 2003, Arvin Bord, Alan Guth, and Alexander Vilenkin were able to show that any universe, which is on average in a state of cosmic expansion throughout its history, cannot be infinite in the past, but must have a beginning. In 2012, Vilenkin showed that cosmogonic models, which do not fall under this condition, including Professor Carroll's own model, fail on other grounds to avert the beginning of the universe. Vilenkin concluded none of these scenarios can actually be past eternal. All the evidence we have says that the universe had a beginning. The Borguth-Vilenkin theorem proves that classical spacetime, under a single, very general condition, cannot be extended to past infinity, but must reach a boundary at some time in the finite past. Now, either there was something on the other side of that boundary or not. If not, then that boundary is the beginning of the universe. If there was something on the other side, then it will be a non-classical region, described by the yet-to-be-discovered theory of quantum gravity. In that case, Vilenkin says, it will be the beginning of the universe. Think about it. If there is such a non-classical region, then it is not past eternal in the classical sense, but neither can it exist literally timelessly, akin to the way in which philosophers consider abstract objects to be timeless, or theologians take God to be timeless. For this region is in a state of constant flux, which, given the indiscernibility of identicals, is sufficient for time. So even if time as defined in classical physics does not exist at such an era, some sort of time would. But if the quantum gravity era is temporal, it cannot be extended infinitely in time. For such a quantum state is not stable, and so would either produce the universe from eternity past or not at all. As Anthony Aguirre and John Kihayas argue, it is very difficult to devise a system, especially a quantum one, that does nothing forever, then evolves. A truly stationary or periodic quantum state, which would last forever, would never evolve, whereas one with any instability will not endure for an indefinite time. Hence, the quantum gravity era would itself have to have had a beginning in order to explain why it transitioned just some 13 billion years ago into classical time and space. Hence, whether at the boundary or at the quantum gravity regime, the universe probably began to exist. Consider now the evidence of thermodynamics. According to the second law of thermodynamics, entropy in a closed system almost never decreases. Given the naturalistic assumption that the universe is a closed system, the second law implies that given enough time, the universe will come to a state of thermodynamic heat death, whether cold or hot. Given that the universe will expand forever, it may never reach a state of equilibrium, but will grow increasingly cold, dark, dilute, and dead. But then the obvious question arises. Why, if the universe has existed forever, is it not now in a cold, dark, dilute, and lifeless state? P.C.W. Davies gives the obvious answer. The universe can't have existed forever. We know there must have been an absolute beginning a finite time ago. The universe's energy, says Davies, was simply put in at the creation as an initial condition. By contrast, Professor Carroll's solution to the problem confronts serious obstacles. He imagines that the overall condition of the universe is a state of thermal equilibrium, a sort of de Sitter space, but that random fluctuations spawn baby universes which pinch off to become wholly independent spacetimes. We find ourselves in one such baby universe in a state of disequilibrium. Let me raise two concerns about this model. First, not only are the production mechanisms of such baby universes admittedly conjectural, but such a scenario violates the so-called unitarity of quantum theory by allowing irretrievable information loss from the mother universe to the babies. Stephen Hawking, apologizing to science fiction fans everywhere, came to admit there is no baby universe branching off, as I once thought. The information remains firmly in our universe. Second, Professor Carroll's solution provides no convincing answer to the Boltzmann brain problem. Since the mother universe is a de Sitter space in which thermal fluctuations occur, and since baby universes grow into de Sitter spaces themselves, there's no explanation in the model why there exists a genuine low entropy universe around us, rather than the mere appearance of such a world, an illusion of isolated brains which have fluctuated into existence out of the quantum vacuum. These and other problems make Professor Carroll's model less plausible than the standard solution that the universe began to exist with an initial low entropy condition. Skeptics might hope that quantum cosmology might serve to avert the implications of the second law of thermodynamics. But now, a new singularity theorem formulated by Aaron Wall seems to close the door on that possibility. Wall shows that given the validity of the generalized second law of thermodynamics in quantum cosmology, the universe must have begun to exist, unless, as in Professor Carroll's model, one postulates a reversal of the arrow of time at some point in the past, which, he rightly observes, involves a thermodynamic beginning in time, which would seem to raise the same sorts of philosophical questions that any other sort of beginning in time would. Wall reports that his results require only certain basic concepts so that it is reasonable to believe that the results will hold in a complete theory of quantum gravity. Thus, we have good evidence, both from the expansion of the universe and from the second law of thermodynamics, that the universe is not past eternal, but had a temporal beginning. So, the second premise of the Kalam cosmological argument receives significant confirmation from the evidence of contemporary cosmology.
But in one sense, the history of 20th century cosmology has been the history of one failed attempt after another to avert the absolute beginning predicted in the standard Big Bang model. We've seen the steady state model, we've seen oscillating models of the universe, we've seen vacuum fluctuation models, chaotic inflationary models, quantum gravity models, most recently the so-called ekpyrotic cyclical models of the universe, all of these attempting to avoid the absolute beginning predicted in the standard model. And one after another, these theories have either been falsified by the data or shown to be mathematically inconsistent, or else they have been shown to imply the very beginning of the universe that they sought to avoid. So I think that the prevailing view among contemporary cosmologists is that the universe cannot be eternal in the past, but that there is a past space-time boundary that represents the absolute beginning of the cosmos. Paul Steinhardt and Neil Turok's so-called brain cosmology, which is an attempt to exploit string theory to develop an eternally oscillating universe in higher dimensions. And they tried to extend this infinitely into the past. But what was discovered in 2003, in the fall of that year, by three cosmologists, Alexander Vilenkin, Arvind Borde, and Alan Guth, the father of inflationary cosmology, through their theorem, they were able to demonstrate that even these models cannot be extended infinitely into the past, but that there has to be a past boundary at some point that represents the beginning of the universe. So even these brain cosmologies and higher dimensional cosmologies, which are really very metaphysical in character, have been shown to be non-infinitely extendable into the past. That is to say that they must have a past boundary. The very nature of science is that its results are always provisional. They're always tentative. Well, there are other versions of the cosmological argument that don't depend on the universe having a beginning. For example, the great German philosopher Leibniz held that even if you have an eternal universe in the past, that doesn't explain why there is any universe. So for Leibniz, the eternality or infinitude of the past was irrelevant
to the question of whether there is a metaphysically necessary being that explains why the universe exists. But this would be relevant, though, to the Kalam cosmological argument, because if it turned out to be correct and could be extended to past infinity, then it would not be true, at least scientifically, that you can give good evidence that the universe began to exist. You would still have all of the philosophical arguments in place against an infinite regress.
And doesn't there need to be some sort of an ultimate explanation of reality?